Hi, kids. Chris Godinez, licensed professional counselor, also the host of We Need to Talk on every Sunday at noon. And then I post this up to social media when I think about it. This video is for educational and informational purposes only. The views and opinions stated herein are mine and mine alone. They do not represent the ACA, the APA, or any other therapist for that matter. Boom, shakalaka, done. I'd like to thank my sponsor, BetterHelp, BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/Chris Godinez. They're an online therapy company. They are international. I've gotten great feedback from people using them. So thank you, betterhelp.com/Chris Godinez. Okay, current event today. So this week has just been a cluster bleep, honest to God. So lots of weird stuff politically going on. Adelita Grijalva was attacked by ICE members in Tucson. She was sprayed by pepper spray, even after identifying herself as a representative and a member of Congress. That to me was an assault, and those ICE agents need to be arrested. That is not okay. If they will do that to a representative of the people, they will do it to the people, and they are doing it to the people. So that is not okay. There is that. The other thing that I read today was that in the new edition of Psychology Today, there was this whole article on healing families. And it basically was like, oh, going no contact, that's not a good thing. And da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, first of all, how many of you were raised with an abuser that, either tried to kill you or sexually assaulted you or whatever? Probably not a whole lot of them. So that made me really angry when I read that. They were basically shaming people for going no contact with or going no contact with family. And they were like, oh, well, the reasons aren't very good. And I'm like, okay, here's a good reason. They are trying to do parental alienation with your children. That's a reason to go no contact with them. I've seen narcissistic grandparents do that. So they're trying to turn the kids against the parents. They are abusive, sexually, physically, mentally, emotionally, or otherwise. That's a good reason to go no contact. Financially, if they're financially abusive. I'm sitting here going, are you smoking something? Because you're not seeing the big picture here. Now, in a quote unquote relatively normal, in bunny ears family, yeah, there's not a reason to go no contact. But if there's abuse going on, if there's parental alienation going on, you absolutely go no contact, 110%. So some of those psychologists that wrote that article, and they didn't make it clear. They were not like, oh, in the case of, all of this abuse, yes, absolutely go no contact. And this kind of folds into what we're going to talk about today. Society has a really hard time dealing with kids going no contact with their parents. They really do. Part of that is societal, part of it is religious based. And here's the deal: complicated grief, complicated families. If you've got a family that is abusive, if you've got a family where there is abuse going on of any kind, you don't want to be around them, and you don't have to be. So that really made me angry when they were like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Here's the deal, guys. And we're going to talk about complicated grief, complicated families, because when an abuser dies, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on. But prior to the abuser dying, the question you have to ask yourself is, if I were not related to this person or these people, would I have anything to do with them? If the answer is no, act accordingly. Because in my experience with my clientele that are dealing with abusers that consistently abuse and they're not interested in changing, it's better to get away from them. It's better to go low contact or no contact. Now, in my case, with my family, I went low contact because I wanted to stay in touch with my mom. Did not so much want to stay in touch with my dad. So I moved as far away as I could, and I stayed low contact, like once a month, once every couple of months, check in, hi, I'm still alive, that kind of thing. But in cases where there is active abuse going on, where they are actively trying to sabotage your marriage, your family, your children, etc., go no contact. And you ask yourself that question: if I were not related to these people, or this person, would I have anything to do with them? If the answer is no, go no contact. So that really irritated the crap out of me when I read that. They also were like, oh, well, but studies are showing that people that have gone no contact, when the person dies, they have all these emotions. Yeah, dummy. It's called complicated grief. Here we go. We're diving into the topic. So this is what angers me. People don't really want to talk about death. They don't. They don't want to talk about abuse. They don't want to talk about the feelings that the survivors of abuse have. When we go no contact, when they die, what happens to the rest of the family if they're disordered? Holy crap. So that's what we're going to talk about. So prior to an abuser dying, very often we will have gone low or no contact. That brings up a whole bunch of emotions in and of itself. There's that, oh, but they're my family. Oh, but they're my parent. Listen, if they were a stranger doing that to you, would you put up with it? No, you wouldn't. And you have this societal thing about, oh, but they're your parents. I don't give a damn if they're the frickin' Pope. If they're abusing you, you do not have to be around them. And anyone who tells you that you have to be around an abusive person is trying to normalize abuse. And I am sure as hell not okay with that. Abuse is not normal. Let me be clear. That is not the norm. So, okay. So you go no contact with them. You're going to have a bunch of emotions. You're going to feel confused. You're going to feel lonely. You're going to feel like you're an orphan. You're going to feel all sorts of stuff. Okay. You will also feel relieved because you're not having to deal with their cray-cray stuff. Laundry's done. You're not having to deal with all their cray-cray stuff on a daily basis. They are out of your life and you don't have to deal with them. And that, believe me, is a huge plus. Huge. Now, the abuser dies. Complicated grief should not be a surprise, but it is to all of us when it happens because nobody prepares us for this. Nobody prepares us for regular grief. I mean, it's crazy to me that as a species, we're born, we live, we die, and nobody is willing to talk about the dying part because it's uncomfortable, because people narcissists don't like to face their own demise. So when a narcissist dies, so much is going to happen. So one thing I've seen narcissists do is they either deny that they're ever going to die. They literally are like, oh, I'm going to live forever. And they don't write wills and they leave you with a financial mess because there's no will. So now it has to go through probate. And now the state gets to decide who gets what. And then if you've got dysfunctional family, siblings, aunts, uncles, etc., they're all going to want a piece of the pie. And it's going to be ugly. Trust me on that one. So the thing I tell people all the time is if you really want to know who your family is and who your friends are, major events will tell you. Weddings, funerals, birthdays, anniversaries, deaths, births, things like that. Because those events bring out the best and or the worst in people, usually the worst in narcissists, the best in healthy, normal people. So, so they will leave a mess. They will absolutely leave a mess. I've seen narcissists do one of two things. Remember, they're so dichotomized. They're either, black, white, right? So they're either no will and everything's a mess and it goes through the courts or it goes through the state decides who gets what, people are fighting over stuff, that happens. Or they're like my dad, who wrote a new will based on who he was pissed off at the time, and would just try to control from the grave. So, and they do that. So just be prepared when they die. There's going to be all sorts of weird stuff happening. You personally are going to feel the gamut of emotions, and your siblings are going to be feeling the gamut of emotions, and they may not be feeling the same emotions that you are, and vice versa. So what I have noticed is that obviously narcissists treat children differently. They treat different children differently. So you've got the golden child, right? So they can do no wrong. They had a great relationship with that parent because they could do no wrong. You've got the ignored middle child. So they're kind of there, but not really paid attention to. You've got the youngest, who's usually the comedian. You've got the scapegoat. You've got, the black sheep. So each sibling is going to have a different take on the death of the abuser if it was a parent. So just remember that. It's going to be very weird. And also remember that disordered people that are unhealed, that have not dealt with their trauma, are going to have a hard time accepting differing feelings or differing views. So for a survivor of abuse who has done the work, who has worked on themselves, who's journaled, who's gone to therapy, who's, done all of this stuff, they're going to have a more kind of balanced perspective on the parent that died if they were abusive. Of course you're going to bounce into, oh my gosh, I wish if only they were normal, if only they'd gotten help, that whole thing. But then they'll also balance that with, okay, but they also had the opportunity to get help and they weren't normal and they didn't try to change and they weren't interested, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that perspective is very different from a sibling who has not worked on themselves. If they haven't done the trauma work, if they haven't done the journaling and the working with a trauma therapist and acknowledging and admitting, yeah, mom or dad or both were abusive, they're going to go into denial. Holy cow, Cleopatra, queen of denial. Suddenly, the abuser is going to be Saint whoever of the perpetually perfect parents. And they will argue with you when you bring up abuse that happened. That happened with me with my sibling. So just know that that's gonna happen. You're gonna have a sibling that's probably gonna go straight into denial and not be able to handle it. There's going to be you who's gone through therapy and working on yourself and this, that, and the other thing. And you're going to be able to go, yeah, that person was not a great person. There were definitely problems, but when you're talking with it through your siblings, don't expect them to be supportive. Don't expect them to be on the same page. Don't expect them to be able to hear you. And that is a huge problem when we're going through complicated grief and we're dealing with the family and we're dealing with the funeral and we're dealing with, financial stuff and things like that. We want to be heard. We want to be believed, right? And if we've got a sibling over here going, well, that wasn't my experience of it, that's very invalidating. So I guess what I'm trying to say is when the abuser dies, and it was a parent, there are going to be siblings, if they are unhealed, if they have not worked on themselves, that are going to go straight into denial and start going, oh, mommy or daddy was perfect. Mommy or daddy was this. Mommy or daddy was that. And when you go, I remember when mom or dad did X, Y, and Z, and they're going to freak out. So just know that is going to happen. So what is complicated grief? Complicated grief is the feelings that we get that are diametrically opposed when the abuser dies. So this is totally normal for us. So abusers, how do I explain? Abusers are not abusive all the time. If they were, none of us would have anything to do with them. So for example, like with my dad, there were aspects, not huge, but there were aspects of my dad that I really liked. He loved history. He loved going to national parks. He loved, all of that stuff. So with him, I missed that part of him. And I loved that part of him. The rest could go take a slow boat to somewhere else because I did not like him. I didn't. So we have these diametrically opposed feelings. It's like we may love them because they were our mom or our dad, or there were things that they did that were kind of good, right? Relatively speaking. But then there was the behavior that was harmful, hurtful, abusive, etc. So it's that I loved this, I hated that. What? And then we'll get this like cognitive dissonance. And that I think is what's happening with the siblings. And yes, I will talk about only children in just a minute. That is what's happening with the siblings, is because they too are probably feeling that as well, but they're unable to put words to it because they're not working on themselves. So, yeah, complicated grief is when we have diametrically opposed feelings about the person who died. We loved certain aspects of them, maybe, maybe not. You don't have to. I mean, there are some people that will die that nobody misses them, you know? And then you have other people where there were certain aspects that, yeah, you kind of liked that part of them, but boy, howdy, you hated the rest of it. So you loved them, but you hated the behavior, you know? And we feel, I think those of us who have worked on ourselves, we feel relieved when they're gone. When they are dead, it's like, oh, whew, thank God I don't have to worry about what's next. What are they going to do now? Who are they going to hurt now? Who are they going to harm now? Who are they going to embarrass now? You know, so there is that sense of thank God they're dead, which is weird to us because normally in a normal family, if somebody we love dies, we miss them and we're not relieved that, you know, they're dead. But when an abuser dies, we are absolutely relieved that they're dead. You betcha. My mom and I, when my dad died, I remember getting the call at work and I was sad, but I wasn't sad because he was dead. I was sad because it was game over. I was sad because that was it. He had no more chance to change. There was no possibility for him to figure it the bleep out, you know? And to me that was really really sad. And I realized, you know, because I'm a therapist and I wasn't at the time, but because I was interested in becoming a therapist, it was like, wow, he'll never change. He'll never get it. He'll never experience joy. He'll never experience satisfaction. He'll never experience, you know, just calm. He'll never experience any of that. It's game over for him. He can't change. He's dead, you know? Of course, it depends on your religious upbringing. You know, being a Buddhist, I definitely kind of believe that they have to go, you know, take stock in what they have done, but and possibly reincarnate. So there is that. But the point being is from a practical level, he was done. At least with me, there was no way for him to ever change, ever grow, ever really apologize, ever do anything. So I got the call, kind of went through that emotion, realized I felt relieved, went home. Mom and I were sitting on the couch and she looked at me, and this was after the funeral, and she's like, I feel so guilty. And I said, why? And she's like, because I feel relieved he's dead. And I'm like, don't feel guilty. That is normal. I feel the same thing. So even at that time, even though I was, you know, still going through my own therapy, I knew that sense of relief was a normal feeling. So don't feel guilty for that, guys. So many of us, when the abuser dies, we feel guilty for feeling happy that they're dead or feeling relieved that they're dead. You know, that's a normal feeling. That is, because again, you don't have to worry about them anymore. You don't have to be like, oh my God, how do I protect so-and-so from him or her? How do I make sure that they don't, whatever, you know? So feeling relieved is a normal feeling. We feel guilty because we hated them. We hated their behavior. Get rid of the guilt. You have nothing to feel guilty of. The only person that should feel guilty is the person who inflicted the abuse on you. That is the only person who needs to feel guilty. So you're going to have all of these weird emotions. You may also gaslight yourself into believing that they were the perfect parent. I have seen that happen as well. And that is a response to having to deal with the fact that this person abused you and now they're gone and it's over and it's okay. So one thing I have heard abusive enablers say is, oh, you cannot talk ill of the dead. Watch me, bitch. I will. You know, it was so funny. When my grandmother died on my mom's side, she was a nasty narcissist. She was a mean, nasty, vile piece of human refuge. So when I remember somebody said that to me, it's like, oh, well, you can't speak ill. And I'm like, watch me. And then I listed all of the things she did. And I'm like, if that woman and I use the term loosely, has the gall to come and haunt me, I will give her a piece of my mind. Oh, please, please do. Please show up at the end of my bed so I can tell you exactly what I think of you. I've never seen her. So, yes, I do believe in ghosts. But the point being is, it's okay to speak ill of the dead if they were not nice people and they did horrible things to you. It's called speaking your truth. That's not speaking ill. That's speaking the truth. Speaking ill would be like saying a bunch of stuff that's not true. That would be speaking ill of the dead. But if everything you're saying is something they did and it's true, that is not speaking ill of the dead. So that BS comes from people who cannot deal with reality, that don't want to acknowledge that they enabled an abuser, that don't want to acknowledge that, yes, this person was a horrible human being. You betcha. So here's the thing. When my dad died, he was the city attorney for Gridley and Biggs, two little tiny towns in Northern California. And of course, my sister insisted that everybody and their dog get an invitation to the memorial. And I was just like, can we just put him in the ground and be done? Thank you. So we had this thing, and I had to deal with people coming up to me. Oh, your dad was so wonderful. Well, yeah, he was great to total strangers. He was. He would donate his time. He would donate money. He would do all sorts of stuff with total strangers, and he would completely denigrate, put down, devalue, discard, harm, abuse his own family. So I had to sit there and listen to people tell me how great he was. And you know what I did is I just went, that was your experience. Yeah. And that's all I said in my head. It was like, hey, you can have your experience. That's okay. I don't need to correct you. Because I didn't, because it wouldn't do any good. So, it's like you kind of figure out who you're talking to. Now, for people that knew me back then, know me, they would be like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, not really. So it's just, you got to understand, there is going to be different perspectives on your abuser, because not everyone gets the full abuse that you got. A lot of people get the charming part of them. They got the Dad of the Year award and all of that sort of good stuff. So, they're going to have a different perspective. So it's kind of like choose your time, which is why I waited to write my book, What's Wrong with Your Dad, and let it all out. So, there is that. So yeah, it is going to be really weird when your abuser dies. And that even goes for a partner that was abusive. You're going to have the same weird amount of emotions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you are under no obligation to go to the funeral. You do not have to if you do not want to. The only reason I went was to support my mom. That was it. I went to support my mom, and that was it. And it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was sad, but again, like I said, it was like game over sad, like no chance for change. That's really sad. That's really sad that somebody no longer has the opportunity to make amends, to grow, to say, I'm sorry, to, sincerely, and I think that's the thing that upset me about the Psychology Today thing, is because they're like, in order to put families back together, the parent will need to have humility. Have you met a narcissistic parent? Have you seen humility from a narcissistic parent? I haven't. So that's why it made me so mad, because it's like, thank you for invalidating those of us who had a parent that was absolutely disordered, absolutely psychotic, absolutely narcissistic, with absolutely no interest in changing, growing, apologizing, nothing. So let it go, Chris. Let it go. Let it go. So yeah. So the funeral for me was more about helping my mom through it, because I knew she had childhood trauma, and I knew that this was bringing up a lot of stuff for her. And it was very good to see him put in the ground. It really was, for me, because it was like, yeah, you're not coming back. You cannot do anything more to me. We're done. And that also is kind of when I kicked him out of my head too. That's when I really was like, yeah, game over. Boop, you're done. Bye-bye. So there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. Guilt, societal stuff. No, don't feel guilty. You have a right to who this person was. who I knew my dad was, he was an abuser. Absolutely, 110%. Could he be charming like nobody's business to total strangers? Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I'm not going to invalidate their experience of him, nor should they invalidate my experience of him or your experience of your abuser. Do you see where I'm going with that? It's like every person had a different interaction with them because they were whoever they needed to be at the time. That's what narcissists do. That's what dark triads do. So the emotions that are going to come up are going to be running the gamut, and they go hand in hand with the PTSD. So the PTSD symptoms may ramp up. You may have flashbacks. You may have uncontrollable crying for apparently no reason. You may have anger. You may have, just numbness. You may have a sense of disbelief. You may dissociate. There is a whole bunch of things that can go on when an abuser dies. All of it is to be expected, but none of it has been taught to us as a society as to what happens, because nobody wants to talk about this stuff. So yeah, it goes hand in hand with the PTSD. You're going to have probably a ramp up of symptoms. You're going to have dreams. I had vivid dreams about my dad, and they weren't nightmares. They were more kind of like reconciling that he was dead and reconciling that there was a part of him that I did love, but then there was a part of him that I didn't love. So those dreams were very helpful and very healing. I recommend keeping a dream journal. I recommend, finding some sort of reputable dream journal thing that you can kind of look up symbology so you can see what it means. Honestly, you want to kind of figure out what it means to you first, and then you can kind of figure out what the symbology is. Jung was very much into that. So that is a good thing to do. Your appetite's going to be weird. You're either going to want to eat everything in sight or you're not going to be hungry at all. That's kind of what goes with grief. Complicated grief lasts longer than a year. So it bothers me when I hear counselors that don't know their a-hole from a hole in the ground go, oh, well, it's been a year. You should be over it. Really? No. Complicated grief can go on as long as 3 years. It can, because in our way of thinking, we have to reconcile what we're feeling, the conflicting emotions, the I love them, I hate them, all of the stuff going on with the family of origin. So, denial that's happening, the, mommy or daddy was perfect, BS, all of that stuff, the flying monkeys, you have to deal with all of that. So then you have to go through all the firsts. So normal grief, you have to go through all the firsts. You have to go through the Victorians had it right. You have to go through all of the firsts, all of the, holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, and then all the way to the anniversary of the death. And then generally people are able to kind of let go. It's weird. It's almost like we hold our breath until that death anniversary comes up. But with complicated grief, it's like, okay, getting through all of this, plus all of this other craziness going on in the background, meaning family, flying monkeys, general public, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see where I'm going with that? Society, the whole thing. Then we come up on the anniversary of the death. Okay, it gets a little easier. And now we're going through the second year and we're having to put them in a different spot. So it's not so much right here anymore. It's kind of set over to the side, but it's still kind of here, because if we have not healed that trauma, if we have not worked on that abuse, they're going to be doing their la, 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 la in our head. And that's the second year. That's when we have to start separating out what is them and what is us. Wait, is this their voice I'm hearing in my head, or is this my voice that I'm hearing in my head? Is this their belief system, or is this my belief system? And then the end of the second year comes, and now it's a little further off. It's a little further away. And you're able to recognize when it's them, when it's old tapes, old behaviors, old things that were said to you, and when it's your stuff. And that's with working on, and I'm going to name the books, The Self-Esteem Workbook by Glenn Schiraldi. You must work on your self-esteem. Abusers do everything they can to tear us down. My dad would come over and whisper in my ear, "Oh, I love you so much." And then the next thing I know, I'd say something he didn't like and he'd hit me. So I'm sitting here going, well, obviously you don't. If you're hitting me, you don't love me. So work on your self-esteem, because we get our self-esteem from our parents. Our parents mirror to us who we are. And if they've got a distorted funhouse mirror, we're going to have a distorted version of who we are. So, Self-Esteem Workbook by Glenn Schiraldi. The Inner Child Workbook by Catherine Taylor. You're going to need to start working on those age ranges where you were damaged by that abuser. Absolutely. Especially if this was a parental unit. Yeah, you bet. So, the Inner Child Workbook by Catherine Taylor. Facing Codependency. I need to turn my sound off. By Pia Melody. So those are all good because abusers teach us to be codependent. They teach us to please them. The Disease to Please by Harriet Breaker. Excellent book. Highly recommended. So those are just, CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker. Excellent books to help you start processing. So while you are grieving, you are also healing, and you're having to take a look at the abuse you went through, the mistaken thoughts, the mistaken beliefs, the BS that they shoved into your head, and you're going to have to start pushing it out because it's not yours. So there's a lot of work that goes into grieving, because it is a grief process. It's more of a grief process for what could have been. If only they got help, if only they were healthy, if only they, made a sincere apology, if only they, whatever. And you've got to realize that we are now able to start working on ourselves without interference from the abuser. So that's really important, that you recognize this grief process is going to be grieving a lot of different things. If your siblings were unable to hear you, if they were lost in their own denial, if they were lost in their own, "Oh, mom and dad were perfect," that kind of thing, then there's a lot of stuff to grieve. There's a lot of stuff to work on. As an only child, it's a little different because you're not having to deal with the siblings, but then that also means there's no other like your age or close to your age support. So that is tough. It is tough when you're like an only child and you don't have someone that has a shared experience. Now, for me, I was lucky. I had an oldest sister that had the exact same experience I did. She went through the abuse. She recognized my dad was abusive, the whole thing. Then I had another sibling that was like totally in denial, St. Bob of the perpetually perfect parents. No, so that was hard. And then I had another one who totally unhealed, hadn't worked on themselves, so much trauma. It was painful to listen to them because they were recounting all of the horrible things my dad did, but yet you could tell they felt conflicted, or they felt like they shouldn't be sharing. And so, yeah, it's okay to share. It is, if your family is safe. If they're not, don't. So, and that's going to be tough because when you're in the moment, you just want to be comforted. So my recommendation is get a good trauma therapist. Abso-freaking-lutely. So part of the reason why I went into therapy is because I knew that someday my dad was going to die. And honestly, I wanted to be okay when he did. And I was, because I had started working on the trauma, working on the depression, working on the anxiety, working on the inner child, working on all of this stuff so that when he did die, I had tools, So that is a really good reason to go into therapy, because if you have a complicated relationship with an abuser, even if you've gone no contact with them, I can guarantee you when you hear they've died, you're still going to go through a whole bunch of emotions. So there is that. Okay, hold on. I want to make sure I have covered everything. So with toxic family, whether it's siblings or aunts, uncles, whatever, you don't have to play the game. You don't. Some of them will try to bait you into, bearing your soul. You don't have to, because they will use that information against you. So be very careful who you share with. And that's part of the reason why I want you to start working on yourselves now before the abuser dies, so that you're kind of in a better position to protect yourself from possibly toxic family members, aunts, uncles, siblings, etc. And total strangers. I mean, the reason I named my book "What's Wrong with Your Dad," available on Amazon, is because a woman walked up to me in the drugstore in Gridley and she was like, aren't you so and so's daughter? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, what's wrong with your dad? And I just laughed and said, you have 4 hours. And I walked out because I'm like, I'm not telling you my story. Thank you very much. I don't know who you are from Adam. So anyway, there is that. So you're going to go through all of these emotions. The family's going to be weird. I want to make this very, very clear. If the family is unhealed, toxic, dysfunctional, not willing to work on themselves, you're going to see some egregious and bizarre behavior. When my grandmother died, my uncle backed a moving van up to her house and cleaned it out because he felt he deserved everything. Yeah, it just, oh Lord, don't get me started. So just be prepared. There's going to be a lot of weird behavior going on and stuff that you're going to look at and go, that's not true. And then you kind of have to make that decision. Is it worth calling them out and having them have a complete and total meltdown when it really doesn't matter? Or do you need to call it out? Is this somebody that you're concerned about their mental health and you want them to not be delusional? It's kind of that little delicate balance between, is it worth it or is it not? So behavior is going to be strange. They're going to do all sorts of weird stuff. Trust me on that one. So complicated families, that just means that they're unhealed. They haven't worked on their traumas. They haven't done anything to change. They're not really interested in changing and getting better. Nothing. So they're probably by their inner child, and you will see behavior of that of a 2-year-old. So temper tantrums, stealing things, meltdowns, etc., etc., etc. Just be prepared. Like I said, weddings, funerals, births, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays bring out the best and or the worst in people. So, and the people who behave badly, you really got to take a look at, they're not healed. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it certainly shows you where they are, and maybe you don't want them around. So things to think about. Okay, let me make sure I've covered everything I need to with the complicated grief. Don't make yourself wrong. Really take good care of yourself. So grieving the loss of what could have been, along with the loss of whatever you might have liked about the abuser, if there was anything to like about the abuser, which you don't have to have. If there was nothing you liked about them, then that's okay too. You do not have to forgive. We talked about that last week. Do self-care like a boss. That means get with friends who love you, who are going to be supportive, who are going to listen to you and validate you. Do eat as healthfully as possible. Drink plenty of water. Just physically get out for walks. Don't do too much, but don't sit around and do nothing. Watch what you're thinking. So our minds can really do mind F's on us and start, oh, well, this, that, and the other thing, and this, that, and the other thing. And you've got to be like, no, stop. I'm going to write out everything that they did to me. I'm going to write a goodbye letter. That is one good way. I must have written my dad over 10 goodbye letters because it took that long to kind of process through all the stuff that he did to me, to my siblings, to my mom, the BS that he put out to people in general. It's like, oh God. So write a goodbye letter. And at the end of it, what you're going to do is the good, if there was any good. There may not have been. So the good, the bad, the ugly, the horrific, and the absolutely unforgivable. And then you're going to basically kick them out of your head. You know what? I'm raising the rent. You do not get to live in my head one more second. How dare you? You do not get to live in my head. Get out. And you say goodbye in no uncertain terms. Trot it out to the barbecue. Read it out loud once like a Declaration of Independence. Light it on fire and let the smoke carry the words to heaven or hell, wherever it needs to go. For me, I did that when I knew he died. And I continued to do that over the course of the next year, year and a half. So it's not going to be a one and done. Don't expect these goodbye letters to be a one and done. They're a great start. They are. But you want to make sure that you're clearing that stuff out and you're not hanging on to anything and you're not allowing them to stay in your head rent free. You can evict them. You owe them nothing. Absolutely nothing. So there that is. Okay. I think I have covered everything I need to tell you about complicated grief, complicated families. Don't expect good behavior. If they do behave well, huzzah. If they don't, they're operating from their inner child. Just remember that. Doesn't excuse it, but it certainly explains it. All right, let's go to the questions and see what we got. My mom was such a big part of my life. How do I get over the fear that the person I both love and hate is going to die and I may not get the closure? Okay, so first of all, let's talk about closure. There is no such thing as closure, guys. There is no such thing. You are never going to get closure with an abuser, ever. Not on this or any other planet. It ain't going to happen. Closure comes from within us. So for me, the goodbye letters were my closure. It was me just going, look, you son of a bitch, here's the things you did that I could never say out loud because it wasn't safe. So you did this. No, I don't forgive you. You can rot in hell, whatever I needed to say at the time, and then, or, here's the good stuff. Here's the bad stuff. Here's the abusive stuff. Here's the really abusive. Here's the go screw yourself sideways with an unlubricated baseball bat stuff, and then get out, goodbye, and you burn it. So we are going to have conflicted. We are going to be afraid of that. That's why I went into therapy. So my suggestion to you would be to go to therapy. Get with a good therapist. Get with a trauma therapist that's going to help you with the conflicting emotions. That's why I initially went into therapy, because I was like, I know he's going to die someday. I have all of this huge amount of anger and huge amount of sadness, and I don't know what to do with it. So basically, I started working these books that we've talked about. I've started, journaling and writing and taking account of my dreams and figuring out what those meant. So that's really how you deal with it, is you don't deny it. You just kind of go, yes, I am fearful of this. This is a fear. But specifically, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of happening? What's the fear? So for some people, the fear is that the abuser will, based on religion, go to hell or purgatory or whatever their particular religion is. And the abused feels responsible for that. No, my love, not your responsibility. Absolutely not. If they wanted to make sure they got into nirvana or heaven or whatever, then they shouldn't have been an abusive POS. That is entirely on them. My father had plenty of opportunities to go to therapy. My mom dragged him to therapy one time. He stormed out. He was so pissed that the therapist called him out on his BS. And he told my mom, we're not ever going back. Chris is not ever going to get therapy. She's not in therapy. No child of mine is in therapy. That whole BS. He was crazy and he refused to change. He was not interested. So guess whose responsibility it is, whether or not he goes to nirvana or heaven or whatever the heck it is. That's on him. So it's not your problem what happens to them. You didn't encourage them to abuse you. They chose. Let's be clear. Healthy, normal parents do not abuse their children in any way, shape, or form. Messed up, psychopathic, narcissistic, dark triads abuse their children, and they choose. They also have a morbid fear of going to hell. My dad went to church 6 days a week, donated money like nobody's business. Why is that? Well, he knew that his behavior was egregious. He knew that the things he did were not okay. And this is where we have a problem with forgiveness, because narcissists will do that. They'll realize their life, they'll go to church, and they'll say, oh, I've asked for forgiveness, so I've got a clean slate, so I'm good. And then they'll go and abuse again, because that's how they think forgiveness works. That is not the way forgiveness works. Forgiveness works when you don't ever do the act again. That's forgiveness. It's like, okay, you acknowledge you did something wrong, go forth and sin no more, right? Good, you're good. You're not sinning anymore, you're good, right? No, abusers, narcissists, they go to church and they go, oh, I repent, I repent, I repent. Oh, good, I'm saved, I'm clean, I'm this, I'm that. And then they go back out and do it all over again. That's what my dad did every single time. So, anyway, forgot how I got onto that topic. Hold on. So you ask yourself what the fear is. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of happening? The closure comes from you, and it's really acceptance. So closure, you're never going to get the apology you deserve. You're not. You are going to have to live with the apology you never got. I'm sorry, my allergies are going crazy today. So basically, what it is, after my dad died, I basically was like, you know what? I'm going to pretend that he gave me a true apology. I'm going to pretend that he took amends. This has nothing to do with him. This is more to do with me, and I'm going to let my little girl inside hear that I am so sorry. You should never have been treated like that. You're a wonderful daughter. You deserve to have respect. You deserve, all of the things that he should have been saying, I said to myself. And I kind of gave the apology to me from him, even though it wasn't him, it was me just kind of imagining it kind of thing. And it was like, yeah, if this was a healthy family, he never would have abused me in the first place. But in the second place, if there was something that happened, a normal parent says, oh my God, I'm sorry. And then they never do it again. So that's what needs to be worked through. That's your closure. Your closure is acknowledging them for who they are. Acceptance, radical acceptance. There's a great bunch of books called Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. And then there's Radical Forgiveness by Colin. Oh, what the hell's his name? Colin. Oh, my brain just left my body. I'll think of it. Anyway, Colin Tipping. There we go. And so there's radical forgiveness, and then there's radical self-forgiveness. So radical forgiveness is for other people. Radical self-forgiveness is for yourself. It's acceptance. It's really like they are who they are. My dad was who he was. He was never going to change. Honestly, I think even if Jesus Christ himself came down, my dad would dig his heels in and never change. So, because that's how narcissists are. They think that they know it all. And they think that they don't have to change. Or if they're afraid, then they'll go and repent and, oh, I'm forgiven. And then they'll go out and do it again. So, which is psychotic, really, when you think about it. So it's your own acceptance. They are who they are. They were who they were. They you couldn't make them change. There was nothing you could do. Trust me. I tried. There was nothing you could do. So it's accepting they are who they are. And this is their problem. This is no longer my problem. They're going to die someday. And this is on them, and that helped a lot. And writing the letters helps a lot. And you can write goodbye letters while they're still alive. You can. It's like, this is you kind of like untangling the knots and, getting the stuff worked out before they die. And I think that's important to do because they are going to die someday. And you don't want to be stuck holding the emotional bag. You want to be able to go, yep, they are who they are. They messed up. This is their choice. Do I have to like them? No. Do I love them on some level? Yeah. Am I sad that part that I loved is gone? Yeah. Am I glad that the other part is gone? Yeah. It's like acceptance. Really, seriously, just accepting what is. So, hold on a second. Don't forget to put question in front of your questions because otherwise it's hard to know what's a question and what's just a statement. Okay. Okay. No guilt. So they do pretend to be our BFF. They do, depending on the type of narcissist they are or abuser that they are. So no guilt. You're not responsible for them. They're the adult. They are the adult. They should have made better choices. No guilt. And that's what I'm saying. If you go no contact with one and they die, no guilt. If they wanted you to be in contact with them, how about they not abuse you? There you go. Healthy, normal people don't hang out around abusers, whether they're related or not. And that's what I keep telling people. If you were not related to this person, would you have anything to do with them? The answer is no, don't have anything to do with them. If the answer is yes, I would, well, then have your guard up and be careful. Enjoy the parts of them that you enjoy, but be prepared for that other part of them that's always right under the surface, you know? So it was kind of like that way with my mom. It's like I loved my mom. I really did. But I also knew that she could not be trusted. There was no trust there. I did not trust that she had my best interest at heart because she didn't. She stayed with my dad. She allowed him to abuse us. She knew what was going on. You bet. So no guilt. No guilt, no guilt, no guilt. Absolutely no guilt. There's no reason for you to feel guilty. They're adults. Let them go. All right, let me get back to this question, make sure I answered everything. Yes, I did. Okay, can you describe pathological envy? Pathological envy is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. So narcissists in particular have pathological envy. They cannot stand it when somebody has something that they do not. You are literally dealing with a 2-year-old, emotionally speaking, 18-month to 2-year-old on a good day if the wind is blowing in the right direction on a Tuesday. They are pathologically jealous. They think that everything should be theirs. Like grabby little kids, They are Schadenfreude. So I was reading about Schadenfreude the other day, and it's a pathological Schadenfreude. It's like they want bad things to happen to other people so that they feel good. And they are angry, like actively angry when something good happens to other people because it's not them. So this is kind of what's going on in the narcissist's mind with weddings, funerals, birthdays, holidays, anniversaries, etc. They get angry because it's not about them. Like seriously, like I'm not kidding you. And people have always been like, well, that's pretty simplistic. And I'm like, well, that's very true. The simplest answer is usually the true one. So they are very jealous that it's not about them or that they don't have it. And they will actively wish harm on the person who does have it, that sense of Schadenfreude. And they think that if the other person is hurt, that they're going to feel better, but they never do. They don't ever feel the emotions that you and I feel. You and I feel love. You and I feel happiness. You and I feel sadness. You and I feel anger. You and I feel, and we just allow the emotions, right? Their emotions are always blunted. It's never genuine. It's never true. It's very shallow. It's very, depending on who they're working, who they're trying to manipulate. I've seen them go through the range of emotions trying to see what's going to work. I mean, that's psychopathic. So envy is when they perceive that somebody has something that they don't have and they want to destroy them, or they want what they have, or whatever. And that's psychological. That's pathological. That's crazy. That's, instead of go get your own, it's like they want to take it from that other person. So yeah, it's cuckoo. I have seen that. Absolutely. How do we help our adult children deal with their grief when their narc dad, XX, passes? It would be beyond awkward to attend a funeral with all of the flying monkeys. So what you can do is you just be honest. It's like, look, your dad was a very difficult person. Or if they're, okay, hold on, back it up. Okay, if they know that their dad was a difficult person, then you can just be point blank and be like, look, I know that you're going to have a whole bunch of conflicting emotions. Maybe you should go see a therapist. It's going to help you because you're going to be dealing with all of these emotions. Here's all the books. You can do that, if they are in denial about the person passing, that might be a little trickier conversation. So you could just kind of feel it out and see how they're feeling. Yeah, you don't want to go to the funeral with all the flying monkeys unless, you're like me and you're like, bring it kind of thing. If you're not ready for that, then don't go. So, because I didn't. So it's kind of like at the funeral itself was small and it was mostly just family. So I didn't have to deal with a whole lot of, flying monkeys. I had to deal with flying monkeys at the memorial. So, and for me, like I said, it was just kind of like, okay, they are who they are. I'm here for my mom. I'm not here for anybody else, and that's kind of what you have to decide to do or not do. And if you don't want to go, don't go. You are under no obligation. Now, if one of the kids says, please go, I would probably go just to be a support, but go knowing that you're in enemy territory and that you are there for one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to help this child or these children through this particular funeral. And that's it. So there that is. It's a really sticky wicket. It really is complicated. Again, unless of course the kids are like, "Oh my god, please come. Please be my support." In which case, yeah, go. But if they're not, if they're like, "Hey, we got this. We're okay. You don't need to go." Then don't go, seriously. So there is that. And then if they're open to it, get them the books. Encourage them to go to therapy. Absolutely. All right. How do I deal with my best friend dying and not being able to say goodbye? Death sucks ass. There is no other way to say it. It is so, I hate it. I do. Because you're right. Somebody dies and we don't get to say goodbye to them because maybe we couldn't be there or whatever. When my mom passed, I couldn't be there. I had other commitments and I didn't know she was going to pass that day. And I couldn't be with her when she died. So that was really sad. I wanted to be there for her, but she told me she didn't want me there when she was dying. And I'm like, ugh. So when we cannot be with somebody and we are unable to say goodbye to them in the time, that's when we do a goodbye letter. Now, this goodbye letter is going to be a little different because the other goodbye letter is a flaming, I really hate your ass goodbye letter. This goodbye letter is going to be more of a, man, here's what I loved about you. Here's what I miss about you. I didn't get to say goodbye, but I just want you to know how much I love you and I miss you. And here are all the cool things we did together. And, I just adore you. And I wish I could have been there to say goodbye, but I wasn't. And I hope you forgive me. That really is what that goodbye letter is going to be. Because we're not always going to be able to be there when somebody passes. I mean, sometimes dying happens very suddenly. Or there's in my case, I had things going on that I couldn't fly up to Northern California and be there. So this goodbye letter is going to be your closure. This is going to be your saying goodbye to your friend. Now, something I do also is that when I feel like talking to my mom, I talk to my mom. I just do. Like, I'll just pretend she's standing in the room and I'll just be like, you will not believe what happened today. Oh my God. And I'll talk to her because that was the kind of relationship that we had. Or if I'm driving, I'll just, start talking to her out loud. Or if something happens and I'm just like, oh my God, you won't believe what happened today. I act as if she's still here. Because in my frame of reference, and then again, this is my personal spirituality, I think our loved ones watch over us. I really do. So, I like to talk out loud. And if I suspect that my grandmother is anywhere near me, I tell her what a bitch she is. So I find that very cathartic. So, it's you do what you need to. And it is, again, acceptance. You were not able to be there. Forgive yourself. You were not able to be there. So you write them a goodbye letter and you get the goodbye that you needed that way. That's and talking to them. I talk to them. It's just, hi, I miss you. I wish you were here. Oh my God, you will not believe what's going on. That kind of thing. So that thing. And I encourage people now, and this is a healthy, normal death. I want to make that clear. It's not an abuser dying. So in a healthy death, in a normal death, in a loving, the person you loved, the person they loved you, I encourage people to talk about them. I do. The thing about our society that pisses me off more than anything else is that when somebody dies, everybody just suddenly stops talking about them as if they never existed. And that is more painful to the survivors than having to talk about them. And people are like, oh, well, I don't want to talk about them because I don't want them to start, I don't want the survivor, I don't want mom or somebody to start crying. It's okay to cry, guys. Crying is cathartic. Crying is just love. Grief is love with nowhere to go. That's the way I look at it. When it's a healthy, normal relationship and the person died, that kind of grief is love with nowhere to go. Talk about them. Talk about them. Talk about the things that made them special. What made your BFF special? What made them special? What did you love about them? What do you miss about them? Talk about them and talk about them to people who knew them. It's really important to just keep them alive by talking about them in a way. That's what we do. That's what healthy, normal death looks like, is that you miss the person that died. It's done. We don't get to say goodbye to them, or we don't get to share the cool things that are going on, but you talk about them and you talk to them, or you write them letters, or you do whatever you need to. And you're going to cry. Sometimes I cry when I think about my mom. Sometimes, sometimes I'm mad at her. Sometimes so it's all of the emotions are normal, and you just allow, and you do it as often as you need to. So in the beginning, when my mom died, I talked to her every day. Not so much now. We're almost 10 years out now, but I do it when I feel the need. Like when I need a mommy, and that's what I do. So you do what will bring you comfort and what will help you process the loss of your friend. And you just acknowledge all the cool things that they were to you, and you make sure that you talk about them. And that way they're not forgotten. So there that is. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Okay, I think that is it. Okay, next week, I want to talk about it is now about you. So a lot of times when we leave an abusive relationship, whether that's a familial relationship or whether that is a partner relationship, when we leave an abusive relationship, it is all about the other person. It's all about changing the other person, or they're doing this or they're doing that, and da 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 da. And we just get wrapped up and stuck in that. It is not about them. It is now about you. So we're going to talk about it is now about you, and how to get out of that very much learned behavior of always, oh, it's about them. It's about them. It's about them. Well, it was about them because, codependency. But now it's all about you. So it's all about you and how you can get out of that, trying to change them, trying to make it different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to talk about it's all about you. Good, healthy, new behavior to start doing once you get out of that abusive relationship, or you leave that abusive family, or whatever. So, all right, you guys, have a great week. Drink plenty of water. Take good care of yourselves. Get some exercise. Eat as healthily as you can. Journal. Do what you need to do to process your emotions, and be gentle with you. That's the biggest thing. All right, my loves, go be awesome, and I will talk to you next Sunday. Bye.